Yeah, it's you're good to go.
Yeah, I'm on the YouTube page.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
you
on the
go, you go.
YouTube
It's you.
page.
Oh yeah, okay, well,
Oh yeah, okay. Well, welcome to the Raptors Republic post-game show. I'm your host Oren Weisfeld. Joining me today is Zorar, the Raptors Republic Gandalf, as Sahal called you earlier today. I think he said Gandalf. Hi- oh, I can't hear you, man. I
Sorry, I
can't
mean,
hear you. Are you muted?
Dumbledore is what he called me. Dumbledore,
Okay.
oh, right.
which is
Oh,
bit much to be
oh,
honest
right,
with
right,
you.
right.
But anyway, it's fine. It's all right.
Anyways, how you doing?
I'm not good, man.
Anyways,
I
how you
just saw
doing?
Lowry like seal the game for the Kings by picking up a tech, which mattered in the end because Van Vliet had a
Yeah,
three there at the end. So
Yeah, like, not.
yeah, like not to like get on the refs because we do it every game, but that did feel like one of those games that after the Raptors came back in the fourth quarter, then you could look at some of those fouls, and it wasn't a favorably refereed game.
no, I would
Would you
disagree
agree
with
with
that. I
that?
mean, I will. It's rare that I will bring the refs into the equation on any sort of result like this because like yeah, of course refs are human, but to focus on that, I think is not doing justice to this thing because the refs will favor the aggressor every single time. The refs will never favor the team that is passive because in basketball, passive is scared. Passive means you're unsure of yourself, you don't know what you're doing, and the refs will always just go. It's human psychology, man. It's not even a ref thing. It's just like one team is being more aggressive, they're more vocal, they're all that. The refs will favor that. So I don't think refs had an impact on this game, to be honest
Yeah,
with you.
no,
Yeah.
I definitely wouldn't.
Yeah, no, I definitely wouldn't blame it on the refs. Like it was interesting because the first 6, 7, 8 minutes of the game, the Raptors really made a point to get inside and to be the aggressor. You saw a lot of Baines pick and rolls, Baines actually finishing at the rim. And then as the game evolved, the Raptors went smaller and smaller. And I think this is like a central, as they get smaller, they tend to A, foul more on the defensive end, and B, shoot more threes rather than actually get to the rim, which doesn't entirely make sense because theoretically, when you're smaller, you should have a more spaced floor and therefore have an easier path to the basket. But the Raptors just seem when they go smaller, I mean, they're playing a couple guys, usually in Stanley Johnson and Utah, who aren't great shooters, and therefore, and DeAndre Bembry today. So even when they're small, they're still not getting to the rim better. They're actually getting to the rim probably a little bit worse. So
Just like,
I think we should talk about that. Just like in general, a concern about this team, I think, is that their identity is to play small, and yet it's not really working. And when a guy like Whiteside is giving you trouble, you really have to be concerned about your
So
defensive
when they go
effort.
small, are they going small for offensive reasons, or are they going small to just keep up with the guards, with the Sacramento Kings guards in this case, who are just having a field day getting into the paint? Uh, I don't think it's necessarily for offensive reasons they're going small. It's more to just keep up with the pace that the Kings have. And in the first half, we talked about DeAndre Fox a little offline. I mean, even when you have Cujo like blowing by you and scoring and pulling up and doing turns and like putting Fred on his hip, you and then you have like Chris Boucher, who was largely ineffective today. Uh, I think you definitely are going. You're trying to get more dynamic on the offense, trying to like get some more ball movement going. But I think it's primarily for defensive purposes, where you're just trying to keep guys in front of you. Because if there's one thing that we know so far this season, and Nick Nurse has stated this as well, is that we we have trouble stopping dribble penetration. And I think it was somebody else who made the point is that we've always had problems stopping dribble penetration. It's just that we used to have Ibaka and Gasol back there who minimize the impact of that. And now that we don't have those guys, the same dribble penetration as previous years is happening, but the impact is a lot greater. And I think what you're seeing today is just Nick Nurse trying to tinker and trying to find a combination which sort of works good on both ends. And I like that. I mean, this is a lost season anyways, to be honest with you. So So when you see experimentation like Bembry coming in, who was fantastic in the time he was there, I mean it's you learn something from this game, which you hopefully can go on to the next one. I mean, that's not kind of like my main thing here. I mean, my like the first half was really about assertiveness and the lack of assertiveness that the Raptors showed on the offensive end. You know, man, like, can we talk about Siakam? Should we talk about Siakam?
Yeah, I thought he had a pretty good game.
Yeah, I thought he had a pretty good game, but go
He had
ahead.
a good game. Statistically, he was what? Was he 11 for 20, 32 points overall? But man, like in that first half when the Kings were down 12, he made a lot of plays which were just momentum killing, opposite fast break inducing plays. Like some of those passes, some of those turnovers he made just did not help the team. And I don't want to focus entirely on Siakam, but I do want to call out that his first half, even though statistically was okay, overall it was very very poor because it kind of killed any momentum the Raptors tried to create, any continuity they tried to create.
Yeah, I
Yeah, I hear you. I think he had some untimely turnovers for sure, but I can't blame it on him because he was their number one source of offense in that first half. So yes, like was he trying to do a little bit too much with the ball? Yes. But was anybody else doing anything effective with the ball in that half? No. So I think you have to cut him a little bit of slack just in the sense that he had a pretty efficient game. On a positive note, he got to the line at a season high, which is something he's really struggled with this season. And I thought that was one of his better offensive games of his career. But I do think it's concerning when we're looking at Siakam now over a season and a quarter span where he's pretty effective against bad defensive teams. Like he's not scared to go up against, Marvin Bagley because Marvin Bagley's bad. But then when you see Siakam against a team like Boston or a team like Philadelphia, he really struggles. And now I think we're at the point where the sample size is big enough where you can actually look at that and say, okay, he's struggling against good defensive teams and not as much against bad defensive teams. And that's probably a reason to be concerned when it comes to a playoff setting.
I agree, and I think Siakam. I think what people are wanting to see from Siakam is just like an explosion of offense, which sort of silences the critics to the point where you're like, of course, this guy can be a number one player. And I was watching the Kings broadcast for this game, and they were pretty open about what they thought of Siakam as a tier one player. They did not think that at all. I mean, former Raptor Doug Christie was on there. A couple guys were on there, and that was the general consensus there. But you're right. I mean, was he the reason we lost today? Absolutely not. I mean, but as the game ended, I'm more focused on the positives, to be honest with you. Like when I see Watanabe today and some of the shots that he hit, some of the defensive plays that he made, those are very very positive. And he's emerged as the wingman, like kind of like this three that we were hoping we could sign on the market, but he has emerged out of the system. So that was a huge positive. Bembry was a big positive. And honestly, I think if the Raptors had OG tonight and they had Norm tonight, they probably would have won this game, right? I mean,
yeah, for sure. But I mean,
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, it is Sacramento, so I don't know
yeah.
how
I
much
mean,
solace I
what do
take
you
from that.
what did you think? What did you think of like Van Vliet running the offense versus Kyle Lowry running the offense? What is your What's like? What are the feelings you get when you see each of those individuals try to orchestrate our offense?
so yeah,
So yeah, I also had this in my notes was something I was going to ask you about because it's not just this game, it's all season and it's demonstrated right off the bat by the guy who's, at the tip off, who's starting with the ball in his hands, and it used to be Lowry, and this season it's Van Vliet. Um More than anything, it really, to me, what it says is that this is not a season where the Raptors are going all out to win a championship. That's what it says. It's just like Van Vliet isn't, he's not a pure point guard, but they're trying to give him to develop those skills. And I think that's worthwhile, but I think it also just says that this season is really about development, and it's a little bit of a transition season, and it's about, finding the guys who they want to roll with going forward and what kind of roles they can put them in going forward. So, you know, it's not just Van Vliet, it's also how much of an offensive load can Siakam have. We're learning, I think, that it's actually not as a number one option. But in general, of course, Kyle, I'm more comfortable when the ball's in Kyle's hands.
Because that's not where I was going with
With that
this.
being said,
You don't think so? I mean, he's had a bad.
you don't think so? I mean, he's had a bad. That's a thing. So it's a chicken or the egg scenario, right? Because Kyle has not been very good this season. He's been very up and down. But I think that's because he's adjusting to a new role, which is off-ball Kyle. He's adjusting back to like Kawhi Leonard season Kyle. And that's not such an easy adjustment to make where you just can go from having the ball last season being the point guard to no longer really being the point guard, right?
I've kind of changed my mind on this situation based on new data. It's that the criticism, the idea that Fred VanVleet cannot be a point guard that can create has sort of been debunked. I think last year there was I heard some people talk about that Van Vliet, oh, he's a two guard, he's not really a one, he can't really play make. And I was skeptical at that time of that opinion, and today we're seeing that when Van Vliet has the ball, he does have the ability to create, he does have the ability to score, and I think the offense generally runs better with him because he is a shooting threat, he's a driving threat, he's a mid-range threat now, and he also supplies, I think, overall, when it's all said and done, better defense than Kyle Lowry. Not that we're talking about defense here, but I find Van Vliet on the ball as a starting point guard completely. I'm comfortable with him. I think as Ben S is saying here, I think he's a pure one, man. I think he just took his path to becoming a pure one, came through becoming a false two. That's all it is. And now that I see him, I want him playing 36 minutes a game at point guard, man. I have no qualms about Fred VanVleet. Kyle Lowry is making, obviously we love Kyle Lowry, Grote and all that, but he's making some pretty silly plays, man. And he's not on the same page as the rest of his teammates. You saw a couple times today he ran a pick and roll with Baines, and like he looked for him to pop when Baines rolled. Like that's silly mistake. Two more plays similar to that happened, and I'm not ripping on Lowry. I'm just saying that I feel much more confident with Fred. I'm focusing the positives here. I feel much more confident with Fred VanVleet at the point than I did a year ago. And that has to bode well for the Raptors' future.
Yeah, I agree going forward. That bodes well for the Raptors' future. I need a bigger sample size, definitely, to say that I'm completely comfortable with that. But I think he's just going to keep getting better in that role. So like look at his career, right? He's a guy that just gets better every year. So I'm not too worried about that. Still, like I said, I think if you gave Kyle the ball from the start of the year and said, you're the point guard, organize this team how you wish, I think he would have, maybe the team would have a little bit of a higher ceiling right now. So here's a couple like interesting stats just about that, because I was listening to Samson's pod with Louis Zatzman this
Pod, by the
week,
way, if you haven't
and
checked
they were
it out,
talking about,
it's one of our best like this season.
Yeah, for sure. And they were talking about.
yeah, for sure, and they were talking about Fred as a creator. And so one of the distinctions between those two that those guys were talking about is that Fred is actually creating like 10 threes a game for his teammates, which is the third most in the league behind Luka and I think maybe LeBron, I forget. But the thing that Fred still needs to work on is creating 2-point opportunities. So we saw a little bit of that in the pick and roll with Baines today. He's getting better at it for sure. But compared to Kyle is way more advanced when it comes to creating 2-point
This season.
Opportunities for his teammates.
No. Hang on.
In general.
No, not in general. I think you got to compare apples to apples.
This season too, I think. I'm pretty sure this season. I don't have the stats in front of me, but I would guess this season because, I mean, Fred, he'll run a pick and roll with Baines once in a while, but other than that, when is he really creating 2-point field goals at the rim for his teammates?
What does creating 2-point field goals at the rim mean? It usually means you're playing with a big man and you are running the pick and roll and the big man is actually finishing. That's I would say 80% of all 2-point field goals or assists, for point guards come sort of in that fashion, at least in the modern NBA.
But Kyle's still better
So
at
what?
that type of pass.
Like what? Okay, I agree. So what? Like what does that mean?
I'm just saying it's one aspect
I'm just saying it's one aspect of the one
Okay.
of the point guard
Okay.
position that he's
Great.
better at.
Let's move on
Um,
before
let's move on before you have to go. I mean, you kind of touched on this because this is kind of a lost season, even though it's not yet, but it's very quickly approaching that. What do you think about the fact that Nurse is playing like 12 guys and has no real rotation at this point in the season? Because on one hand, it's like you said, it's good that he's like giving guys chances and seeing what works and what doesn't. But when you on a winning perspective, we're trying to win here. No one is familiar with the lineups they're playing with, right? Like every game, it's completely new lineups, completely new formations, and no one knows where anyone's supposed to be. And in that, it's frustrating to watch
Hey,
for me.
Coach Weisfeld with the clipboard. Okay, Coach Weisfeld. What is your in this
All right,
on
here we
this
go.
team? What is your 8-man rotation? What's your 8-man rotation? For sure, you're like these are my top 8 guys. Go.
I think he needs it's rapidly approaching the time in the season where he needs to figure out the identity. So if we're going defensive, then the 8-man rotation is, Utah and Stanley on top of the guys. So the starters and Boucher and Powell. But if we're going to go offensively, then I probably want to see more Malachi Flynn. I probably want to see maybe more Matt Thomas, even though today was a terrible day for Matt Thomas fans because Corey Joseph was blowing by him every time he was like on him. And that's why he doesn't play, just so everyone knows, because people will target him and he cannot stay in front of
How you
anyone.
asked for an 8? I asked for you for an 8-man rotation, and you gave me back like 13 guys.
I gave you 9. I gave you 9.
But you caveated that with
if I was
if I'm
putting on the
looking for
coach's hat,
defense versus offense.
and I think I
yeah, and I think Nurse is a defensive oriented coach, so I think there's your 8 right there to me. Boucher or 9, Boucher, Powell, Utah, and Stanley.
Bree today?
yeah, but
Yeah, but
he
I mean, he's a nice playmaker, but if you have OG there, I don't think there's enough
So
front
you asked
court
me like what
spots,
I
right?
thought of it. I don't mind it. Because I don't think any of these guys have played consistently well enough or above an above average level. Like, in a normal distribution, they haven't been on the right side long enough to say I warrant this rotation spot. I don't think anybody has done that. I think Watanabe has sort of come close, like of Davis and Stanley Johnson, obviously. But Watanabe probably is a little further ahead for defensive reasons. But have any of these guys kind of stamped their name on a rotation spot? I really don't think so. I don't. So, and
No.
given that the season doesn't really mean much, I think it's totally fine for him to like experiment and see which of these guys can go into next year. You raise a good point, yeah, but that's going to result in a low win total, and I think we're going to make the postseason probably, right? And we're going to finish like the whatever this maybe the 7th, 8th, 9th, whatever that seed area. Like, do wins really matter that much? Like I don't think him finding a rotation and sticking to 8 guys or 9 guys consistently will necessarily result in a higher win total. I think what we are doing right now, both paths kind of lead to the same win total in my opinion, just because it's the same players really. Like it's not like these guys are so much better than each other that going with this rotation will result in a very different outcome. Now, in terms of identity, that's a really good point because this team does not have an identity and this team really doesn't know how to win. The bad part about having inconsistent lineups is that when the game is tight, when you're closing, you have a unit that hasn't played so much together. And that's a valid point. I do believe one of the reasons they kind of stumble in the fourth quarter is because they're kind of looking over their shoulders. They don't really know who's going to play. They're not familiar with each other. I get it, but I'm saying even if you put the same 8 guys together, other problems might arise, which will negate the whole thing. So I don't know, man. I like watching a lot of players play a lot of minutes and just see what they have to offer.
Mm. It's just a stark contrast from last season when the rotations were so crisp. We knew exactly who was coming in at one point in the game, and they knew how to play with each other so well. So it's just a little frustrating from a fan's perspective, but I understand it. And in terms of the big picture, I definitely think it's fine.
What do you
No
think of
one's
this
earned
comment that
anything.
Pascal should have gotten into the game earlier in that fourth to kind of get things, because Nurse has done this a couple times. He's held, well, his timeouts are a little suspect, and he is the Pascal comment is a fair one. I thought the same too. I thought where is he, like he's our, like, you know.
I thought the same, but they were winning those minutes, so it's hard to criticize it. That's when they pulled the game within 4 when he was out.
Man,
So
we gotta start talking
kind of
about
hard
our
to criticize.
defensive issues. Really, I mean, we're focusing.
Can I just say one point on the Pascal thing? When he did come in, he was being guarded by Whiteside, and they didn't run any. He was in for the last 3 minutes of the game, and they didn't run any actions for him to attack Whiteside, and that's what frustrated me. Like the fact that you can close a game with against us with Whiteside on the floor as your defensive 5 is quite embarrassing, in my opinion. He's one of the most slow-footed big men in the league, and a guy like Pascal should be able to score against him, quite frankly, pretty easily, especially if you put him in the pick and roll, and they just didn't do that at all. They relied on the 3 ball like usual.
You look at advanced stats and all that, and we don't really need to do that. You look at the box score, there are some things that just pop out. 55% shooting from the Kings. I don't know if you can win an NBA game when you give up 55% field goal shooting to an opponent. Like, you have to be like basically flawless offensively to overcome something like that. And you, on top of that, the Raptors are not also a great rebounding team. Like, I don't know the exact stats on everything, but I don't think we have won less than 5 games this year when we are plus in rebounding. So we give up clean looks, and we don't rebound better than our opponent. And you put the two together, it's a miracle we have 7 wins, man.
Yeah, I mean the wins came against not great teams, and yeah, no, the rebound. We're one of the worst rebounding teams in the league. We play small. Our offensive rebounding this year is actually better than it has been in years past, and that's mostly because of guys like Chris Boucher who have been hitting the offensive glass. But our defensive rebounding is abominable. And that's the thing about that goes back to the identity. They want to play small, but if you want to do that, you have to gang rebound. And they do it for stretches. They have done it for stretches, but I mean, Eric Koreen wrote about this in the Athletic last week. Like their mental like fortitude and their ability to play focused for 48 minutes hasn't been there once this season.
When people start going into the mental aspect of things, I call little BS on that, because you can't look inside people's brains and say mental. Or here's a problem that I do think exists because of rebound. When they do try to gang rebound, it actually works against their offense, because this is a team that I don't think anybody will doubt. This is a controversial statement. They are orders of magnitude better in transition and on the break than they are in the half court. When you gang rebound, what you're doing is you are committing more guys to the back court. Like, you're basically trying to get the defensive rebound, which takes away from your transition game. So it's like a, whatever, double-edged sword or a rock in a hard place, that you have to make these tough decisions. Previous incarnations of the Raptors had Ibaka and Gasol there. Now we have Baines. Like, we used to have Ibaka and Gasol just worry about the boards, get them. And how many times did you see Gasol get the rebound and make that one two-handed pass, like to the past half court, and we kickstart our offense? We can't do that now because our big men are not great rebounders or great passers, which forces us to do gang rebounding, which hurts our offense. So it's almost like and I think Blake wrote this a while back, and in our group chat I told him it's like whack-a-mole. Like, you fix one problem, something else pops up, we don't have the
Okay.
assets to plug enough holes playing like that.
So that's a really good point, and I'm working on a story about basically that exact same thing right now, and I've been diving into the numbers. So it's really interesting that you say that, because the Raptors transition offense, it is better than their half court offense, which ranks 22nd in the league right now. Not good. They're getting out in transition, second most in the league. About 20% of their offense comes in transition. However, while last season they were the most, or the third most efficient team in transition, this season they're the third worst. They're 27th in the league in transition efficiency. And when you dive a little bit deeper in, they're actually playing really well off steals, but when they defensive rebound, that's when their transition efficiency is horrible. That's when they're just doing poorly. And you see it like just watching, like you said, and you also see it off steals. Like Fred today had that one very early on where he just went and he ended up getting swiped and the ball went off his knee. Like he'll be ultra aggressive and just like get blocked at the rim all the time. So yeah, their transition offense is their best source of offense, and yet it's way worse than it was last year in terms of efficiency. And a large part of that is just like you said. I think another thing to add on top of the offense, on top of the gang rebounding, more guys being in the backcourt, is fatigue. I think when you play small, I think fatigue plays a factor where you're battling big guys. I think Siakam's a really good example of this. He's had a way bigger role defensively on this team because there's no longer Gasol to clean it up. Instead, it's been Siakam helping, and he's been terrible in transition this year because of it.
Ellis on the chat raises a very good point. I mean, even before Gasol, we used to have JV. And JV, for all the criticisms that went against him, he was a pretty good rebounder who dealt with a lot of these things. And so it's for the first time in years that we have to deal with a situation where a center play is poor. And then pulling that thread a little bit more, there is no transition game when you give up 55% shooting because you're inbounding the ball from a dead ball position. That only works if you're stopping guys and you're getting long rebounds and you helter-skelter defense. Maybe the other
Well, Kyle Lowry would like a word with you, but
so there's a lot of, again, this whack-a-mole, man. There's too many problems for us to have a consistent identity because there's too many issues. And I think we've talked about this already, that there's a pretty significant imbalance on the roster when it comes to guards and big men. And even if this season is about nothing and developing players, I think you still have to address that just so you can play some normal freaking basketball and not end up in these situations where you have like, 5 guys and the biggest one is like who was it today? Like when Siakam was on the bench, like I think our biggest guy was like Watanabe at some point on the floor.
Or Stanley.
Or
that's
Stanley.
not,
But
yeah,
you're not gonna win too many games with that. Hey, dude, I gotta go, man.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, no worries.
but
that was good.
a quick plug. You're doing the show with Sahal on a.
So me and Sahal.
So yeah, me and Sahal Abdi, we're gonna start doing this post-game Raptor show every Raptors game on the Raptors Republic YouTube and Twitter channel. It'll be live right after every game. So be sure to follow us and be sure to follow Raptors Republic on YouTube and look out for that. And we'll be having guests on throughout the season. We'll be taking questions. We'll be doing all sorts of fun stuff. So tune in for that. It's going to be fun. And even if we're losing games, we're going to try to make it fun.
Door out. Okay, man. Thank you.